Hey, so I just noticed an interesting conversation going on online about sex trafficking, and it brought me into some interesting research, and so I just wanted to make this video to share my thought process and like what I discovered. So basically, there was a post resharing someone's Facebook post story of finding a zip tie on like the hubcap of her car, and some like lurking men, and she was telling it as a story of like I almost just got trafficked and kidnapped. And an interesting conversation was ensuing on the thread after that. A lot of people, shocked and saying, stay careful out there. And then one person brought up, this story has been like debunked a lot. It's a very, like, this zip tie story is very common. It was a popular thing going around the internet. And if you're looking for real facts about sex trafficking in this country, I would suggest this organization called Shared Hope. And so I clicked on that link and went to this website. It's, the focus isn't great there. Yeah, sharedhope.org. I'm like, okay, what's this about? Let's go here. Okay, this got to be a pretty basic page of theirs. What is sex trafficking? So I'm reading their infographic, and I'm noticing some kind of weird things, like it thrives because there's serious demand. Demand is an interesting word to focus on in this scenario, and I'll kind of explain more why, but that just was a little bit of a piqued my interest. And we're just going through the story that they're painting of sex trafficking here. Some stats. And down here was where I really had that suspicion kind of validated with the focus on demand earlier, where they say right here, we work hand in hand with state and federal lawmakers to strengthen laws so buyers and traffickers go to jail and survivors are protected. This is generally, the reason it was a red flag in my mind was because this is what Nordic model organizations say. And the Nordic model is a law enforcement approach towards sex trafficking, where you criminalize and prosecute the buyers of sex, and not the so-called victims. And this is something that I've learned over the past couple years of like studying sex workers' rights and what trafficking is, that the Nordic model is like, it's considered to be like more progressive, right? It's better than actually penalizing people who are victims of sex trafficking. Of course, we want to reduce their fear of interacting with the law, right? And a lot of us have these like nice ideas of Nordic countries, like, oh, their teachers are paid better, and then their new mothers and fathers both get maternal and paternal leave for like months, and like, oh, these, Sweden and Finland and whatever, these countries are much more like politically, socially evolved than America, and so I think that storyline is something that we kind of are quicker to trust laws and societal like norms that Nordic countries enforce. And but anyways, so it's commonly known in the community of like sex worker-led activism and rights work that the Nordic model actually negatively impacts sex workers. It has a strong negative impact on consensual sex workers, and it even makes life harder and less safe for trafficked victims often. And I can talk more about that later, like maybe I'll make another video, I don't know. But I wanted to just kind of focus on my thought process here. So I wasn't sure that meant this was a Nordic model organization, because obviously, they're saying that we only want to penalize buyers of non-consensual sex work. We want to penalize, obviously, people that are engaging in criminal behavior where the person is a victim and they've been like kidnapped or coerced or whatever. It's not like a consensual full-service sex worker. And so I wasn't sure how to analyze that, and I just went to Twitter because I follow a lot of like sex work researchers and people in the decriminalization movement and organizations that are for sex workers and trafficking victims that are led and staffed by sex workers and trafficking victims. And so obviously there's a lot of trust there when it's for the people by the people. So I just asked a question. I said, I'm trying to learn how to distinguish a true anti-trafficking organization from an anti-sex work organization. Well, how can you tell? For instance, if an org mentions penalizing buyers, is there any way they can lobby for laws that only penalize buyers of non-consensual sex? Or is mentioning end demand and lobbying so that buyers go to jail really just a red flag that they are a Nordic model organization? And I said I'm combing through this Shared Hope website. I'm trying to assess this, and I tagged some of the people that I know to be writers on the topic, sex worker activists themselves, and a couple of chapters of the Sex Workers Outreach Project and Decrim New York. The main person who I follow, who is actually in Thailand where I am right now, doing research on sex work here. They said you got it 100% correct, in my opinion. If one of their objectives is to criminalize buyers, that is an automatic red flag, as sex workers depend on buyers for survival. That's just one of the reasons why the Nordic model hurts consensual sex workers, because it takes away their like safe client base. Anyways, so we heard that end demand thing in the tweet, and I forgot I wanted to show where that was here. I can't remember where exactly they said end demand on the site, but anyways, they invite you to download their 12 warning signs of sex trafficking. So you put in your email, which I did, and I got, then it took me to this confirmation page where they're giving me some things on the sidebar, inviting me to order a book called Renting Lacey. Learn more about child sex trafficking in America by ordering your copy of Renting Lacey, a story of America's prostituted children today. This riveting account exposes the dark underworld of the trafficking industry through the stories of those who live there. And then there's this test where you can see how your state scored. Find out how your state scored on protecting children from sex trafficking in the 2018 Protected Innocence Challenge Report Card. And I just thought that this term, protected innocence, was really interesting. Because, I don't know, it's another sort of like philosophical red flag to me, when they're talking about, really presencing innocence as the main thing that people lose when they are trafficked, and that's the most important thing to fight. First thing I think of is like their human rights, their lives, their access to freedom, but instead they're focusing on protecting innocence. And it's hard not to see it with this lens of like, what's the opposite of innocence? Guilt. So are children who are sex trafficked then, because we couldn't protect their innocence, are they guilty? And do they carry some mark of guilt or shame upon them? And that just harkens back to like a lot of moralistic, religious views of children and of women and of sexuality. It's just kind of weird that the main thing you would want to protect is innocence rather than like lives. I don't know. Anyways, so then I got my email. Thanks for your interest. And then so I opened up this warnings of sex trafficking poster, and these are some interesting things, like there are 12 bullet points of the common signs. I feel like I've seen some people unpack this and unpack these types of warning signs for the sort of like coded language that they have in them, but I'm not personally like that smart about that stuff, so I'm just going to move on to a very understandable red flag here, which is to report a tip or connect with anti-trafficking services in your area, contact U.S. Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. That's right. ICE is their number one organization that they suggest people contact if anyone's showcasing any of these warning signs, like an older boyfriend or a so-called gang environment or having expensive clothes, or sexualized behavior. That's on their list. And I just wanted to talk about this with my friends, because